a reconciliation entrepreneur. I'm passionate about reconciliation, justice, and building the beloved community. I'm here with my colleagues, my compadres, my comrades, my friends. We work in different spaces together, and over the years, we've enjoyed the space. But let me have them introduce themselves. I'm here with Brett Anderson and Olefile Masangane. So over to you, Olefile, and then over to Brett, just to give us your greeting and who you are and what's your passion and what's your AKA.
Good morning, South Africa. Good morning to the world. My name is Olefile Masangane, and yeah, I serve first and foremost a community in the south of Johannesburg at City Deep, and then I serve nationally with Heartlines. That's who I am, and I'm really passionate about people. I'm passionate about people really just taking their destiny into their own hands and not wait for someone out there to come and decide for them how they should craft or look at life and so on. So it's just about empowering people to be themselves.
Thank you, Olefile. Can we get a loud splash for Olefile? 1, 2, 3, and great stuff. Friends, next up on this live streaming, we've got Brett Anderson. Brett, please let the people know who you be.
Hi there. My name is Brett Fish Anderson, aka Brett Fish Anderson, and I am in Cape Town, work with Heartlines part-time, and spend the majority of my time also just trying to see people live their best lives, trying to challenge people to live out what they say they believe. I think is the kind of heart of what I do, especially as a person in the church, trying to see people who call themselves Christians follow Jesus in the way they live their lives, but just everybody just embracing life and living well with each other.
Beautiful. Can we get a loud splash for Brett Fish Anderson? Yeah, some of us are grateful to do these loud splashes, but as of March 15th, our president made a national declaration on the evening of March 15th that in many ways have shifted us in South Africa. We started tracking with the globe and across Africa on the state of disaster as it relates to hashtag Corona, hashtag COVID-19. This live streaming today that's coming out to you from myself, Seth Nike, Olefile Masangane, and Brett Fish Anderson, is the main idea we want to do is in such a time as this, capture some critical reflections that we are thinking upon as people that work with organizations nationally. Some of you have heard the name Heartlines. Myself, Brett, and Olefile have been doing mobilization work on a brand, if I can call it a national brand, hashtag What's Your Story, talking about empathy, trust, and reconciliation. Today, in such a time as this, we'd like to, through the power of story, share with you some critical reflections. So let me begin. I've been thinking a lot about, in my community, the reality of how COVID-19 had to be considered in the divide of race, class, and gender. The difficulties that people are facing, the realities of when March 26th arrived in South Africa, many folk were thinking upon how it is that they're going to live in lockdown. Well, by and large, our so-called middle-class people were able to abide by the lockdown in the 26th, but clearly on the 27th of March, we had large groups of people in different townships all across South Africa going into the place and space of needing to do some shopping, largely, as we learned, because employees hadn't paid people on time by the 25th or the 26th. These were our people in South Africa that largely work in service industries, around restaurants, around domestic workers, around petrol stations, and so on and so forth. The lazy critique of the news, and I don't want to name every news broadcasting, but the lazy critique on news broadcasting and social media at first was, oh, look at people not abiding by the law of the land. But if we sought to understand and begin to empathize and understand people's contextual pain, we became aware already by the 27th, just by asking, listening, and then engaging with people as they told us, listen, we needed to go to shop on the morning of the 27th because we didn't have a chance even to buy some bread and millie meal or milk and grocery items. So this led me to giving a critical reflection to some of my colleagues that we should be careful of our lazy critique of the numbers of people that live, if I may say, in a much more humble um, economic access space where they don't have economic access as would those folk that are earning, in a percentile that's above, if I can say in South African terms, above 20K or even above 15K a month. These are folk that are living hand to mouth kind of people. They're not beneath the poverty line just yet. So they're earning more than 1,000 rand a month, but still they're in a service industry dependent on the acts and kindness and justice of the employees. So my critical reflection was, hey, people out there, stop our lazy critique of people on the 27th. The other thing I'll just lastly say, and then I'm going to hand over to Olefile as he thinks about COVID-19 and then move on to Brett, is just to say that we had to also take care of retirees and so on. My dad is a retiree and he joins with lots of our people. I can't even call him a retiree. His work ended because of disability and so on. But he joined the social welfare grant, and like millions of South Africans had to go on the 2nd of April to collect their grants. So people couldn't respect the lockdown. This was a key factor as well, that we had lots of our people that are ranging between the ages of 50 plus and even younger at times, but in disability grants and social welfare grants that had to go to collection spaces across the country. This also made it difficult for them to abide by the lockdown on the 26th of March. So as I share that with you, it's just again in line of how we need to understand what are the needs of our people in the time such as this, as we deal with hashtag COVID-19. So that's from me as a critical reflection. Over to Olefile Masangane.
I think for me, same with you, Seth. It's I think we have being simplistic in our reflection of what's happening around this lockdown. If I think about, for instance, my mother, who is 89, also a retiree, living in Bronkhorstspruit. My sister was just I was on the phone with her the other day. She had to go and buy some stuff in town. She arrived at 11:30, and she only got into the taxi at 4:30. She was there the whole day. Um, and so she said to me, I got hungry, and I forgot my hunger in just that time I spent waiting to get into the shops and doing the shopping. I got headache, and that headache disappeared in the hours I spent waiting to go into the shops and buy. So these things are it's so easy for us to do blanket statements. We don't look and we don't consider what people are going through out there. I mean, just news of the week is the permits for the informal traders that and now and I was just watching just images coming through television, how it was so difficult for even those guys queuing up, just desperate to make a living, desperate to just put bread on the table. They could not adhere to the lockdown regulations of social distancing because everyone was just scouring and desperate for the permit so that they can go back and make a living. So I think these lockdown issues in a country like South Africa, where you've got just like the disparity and the gap between the rich and the poor so wide. It's so difficult. I think we have got to really, really stretch our minds to think beyond our own little spaces. I can go on the app and I can order a Pick and Pay delivery, and the food can be here. you know, but not so for some of our people. Even though I'm using LTE, at least I can connect and have a chat with a face that is familiar to me. But I haven't seen my mother, who does not have the technology. I haven't seen her face to face. I'm locked here. I can't. I wish I could just run, to get into the car and drive to Bronkhorstspruit to spend time with my old lady. But I don't know when am I gonna be able to do that. So, my cousin brother passed away 2 weeks ago, just before lockdown. On Thursday, they had to bury him on Thursday, not a Saturday. So some of us weren't able to go to the funeral. So these are the things that are there, and it's really difficult for people to manage things. I mean, even in a South, like the one I'm living in Southdale, and Southdale is and West Tefontein. It's almost like a township. Yeah, there's people moving in the streets and people walking to the shops. People don't drive to the shops; they walk to the shops. And every now and then you hear a police siren and people being shouted at, "Go back home, go back home." And so I just feel that these challenges are there, and we don't consider that not everyone will have access to the things that some of us have, like a car to get to the shops, and the app or the digital connectivity to be able to order groceries and stuff like that.
Wow, Oli, thank you so much. It looks like we just got Brett back in time. He went offline, and just like you were mentioning just now, for us in South Africa, data is also. I was taking a good go at a group of people I was meeting at, because we spoke about the data access. So for some of our people to do online activity, it became a reality just last week that we as an organization decided to give data to some folk to join online, just for care and empathy and trust. So friends, as you're listening out there, I want to say thank you to Himal Singh for checking in with us. Those of you that are on the thread right now, you're welcome to make your comments and check in. But I'm highlighting my two colleagues. One is Olefile Masangane, giving us critical reflections in a time of COVID-19. For summary, as Brett has come on, Olefile speaks about what he's seeing nationally, the reality of lockdown, and what lockdown means when he can reach out to some friends because he has LTE, but his own mother can't be reached out to. The reality that living in Southside Joburg, when those of you heard names like Southdale and Terfontein, this is Southside Johannesburg, South Africa, if you were part in another country, where Olefile says you're looking at township realities of people not even having cars, but we need to consider lockdown and COVID-19 when they're walking and moving. So again, hopefully, as we're sharing, we don't share it to be boastful, but to broaden our thinking, because some people out there, we're talking about futurists, we're talking about people that want to make plans about the future. But if we are not grounded in a contextual reality that's filled with more voices, that are grounded with our ears to the floor, listening to the feet of the people that are agitated and irritated, we'll be missing the mark. So another practitioner in the field is Brett. He's with us. I'm so happy that his LTE or his Wi-Fi is allowing him to be with us. So thank you, Wi-Fi. Let's give a loud splash for Olefile one more time as we move to Brett. Great stuff. Brett, your critical reflections in the light of COVID-19.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I missed a bit of what Olefile said, but thanks for the summary. And I think me kind of bouncing offline is a good prophetic picture of the distinction, because you hear people saying, especially on Twitter and social media, like we're all in this together. And there's a small element of truth in that, globally, locally, or whatever. We are all facing this thing called COVID. But as you guys have been saying, for me, being bounced off an online call is probably my biggest uncomfortability at the moment, compared to millions of people in South Africa. Like that is the uncomfortable thing, or the fact that I'm out of white chocolate Easter eggs. And so the reality changes, as you've been saying, whether you're in the suburbs or whether you're in the townships. And I think it's so important for us, even just watching the way we speak, the way we post things on social media, stuff like that, because stuff we post can be so negative just when the context changes. I do a lot of shouting at people in the suburbs, and so I've got to be aware, or I've got to disclaim, or I've got to hold intention with that. The same things that I'm shouting at people who are wanting to go jogging or cycling or walking their dog or whatever, like that same shouting is not happening to people in the townships, because the context is so different. And so what I expect from the wealthy, I don't expect the same thing from the townships, while at the same time understanding that we have to figure out and understand collectively as a nation, and for us locally where we are connected in smaller spaces, what do we do in the townships? What do we do in areas where people live on top of each other? And so I can't say to them, just social distance, just wash your hands every 20 seconds, because it's completely unrealistic. But I can't not say anything and not do anything. I've got to realize that in those spaces, the need is far greater for their safety and for the safety of us as a nation. This is a time where we find that Ubuntu really counts. I'm a person through people, and that whole thing, you're only as strong as your weakest link, because it's not just going to affect, from a selfish point of view, it's not just going to affect the people in the townships, it's going to affect all of us. And so we've got to hold a lot of things in tension at the moment. So I still need to be shouting at the people behind my back wall. There's a cul-de-sac behind my back wall, and 2 of the nights in the first week, a bunch of white neighbors were meeting, like 10 people with kids with beers in hand, meeting in the cul-de-sac for stuff. I'm calling the police on them. but I understand there's a different story when it comes to people in the townships. And if I can just add one more thing, I think one of the things that's been so exciting in Cape Town, there's a Facebook group called Cape Town Together that's been an amazing source of information, of connection and stuff. And I think out of that group, or aligned to that group, came these things called CANs. I'm not sure if they have them around the rest of the country, community action networks. And they are doing a lot of phenomenal work. And you probably have some doing really great work and some being completely ineffectual. But I've heard of a lot of ones doing really great work. And one of the things I've been most excited about, my wife is on the leadership team or whatever it is of one of the groups, but a lot of the groups in wealthier suburbs have partnered with a group in a township, in an area of low economy, or an area where people are struggling to get resources. And it's been amazing to see those have become places of connection in terms of dropping resources across, in terms of networking, in terms of sharing, and seeing in a small kind of victory sense, a way where balance is kind of gotten in this country, where we know that the wealthy is such a small percentage and they hold all the resources, and the masses are really big percentage and they hold little resources. So we're seeing like tiny areas where hopefully it's prophetic about what can happen after lockdown and COVID, that it doesn't just go back to normal. But it's been amazing to see. We are Plumstead and we are partnering with Lavender Hill to be able to see some two-way interactions going. And that's, I think that's where we've all got to be looking. I don't think people, especially people in our kind of class space, I don't think we can be sitting just surviving lockdown. We've got to be actively looking for ways in which we can connect with what's happening in areas that are less well off. And there's a variety of ways to do that. So what are ways that we can do? And it's been exciting. Maybe if I can just, I said that was the last thing, but I do have one last thing. Last night I was hearing about the way that some of the homeless people are being treated in Cape Town, and it just left me completely feeling overwhelmed in terms of what am I doing with my time? Like what difference am I making? There's people that are being treated like animals, and there's hectic situations out there, and I've got it so good. And then within 30 minutes of that, I had a friend from a township connect with me on Facebook, and I was able to connect him with another friend who's got resources. And so, like in the smallest way, my strength is networking. My strength is knowing people on both sides of the fence. And so that was a way that I could connect. And so I'm still feeling overwhelmed. I'm still feeling hectic, but I need to at least use the little bits I have, and everybody has to use what they've got to really start making a difference. The nation needs to work together right now.
Thank you. Last splash on you, Brett. The critical reflection summary of living life in a space of the racialized divisions in our country. Geographically, how we live is politicized. I said just in the week that passed that for us, COVID-19 would have to be reflected on geopolitics, socioeconomics, what people have as access and not. Brett has given us a good on-ramp, and in the space of caring, I want to move from critical reflections to a caring reflection. and I'll ask Olefile and Brett to do as well. So I found that, how do we take what we have, the little we have in our hands? There was a writer some many years ago. He wrote a song. He says, "What's that you have in your hand? I can use it if you're willing to lose it. Take the little you have and make it grand." So whether I have little or I have much, there are some people in South Africa that we have enough. We have enough that we can care and we can share. There are others of us that we don't have enough, but we have the little. And even if we have little or much, how can we turn on our consciousness, our actions to caring? So some practical learnings in our community on site at Joburg, people are considering with me in leadership frameworks, how can we take monies that we have while we can't be with people, but make sure that food security is a key concern. Not just for the month of March, which we tried to do it last month, but through April and May and June. How can we prioritize food security in our country? We've lost Olefile, he may come back. So just caring and sharing about food security and the importance of how we can make sure that we're not just talking intellectual boo-ha, but actually on the ground with people around necessity of people's water, people's eating, and people's living arrangements. So we want to send a shout out of love to people like the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation that have been mobilizing our national campaign on food security, the Solidarity Fund that have been mobilizing on food security, and other efforts, even like you heard Brett say, where people are on this group being together, trying to mobilize people to do the acts of kindness that we can. I see Olefile coming back. I'm going to give him a push into the thread. So welcome, Oli. And just to appreciate that Brett didn't want to be in the middle of us all, I'm just going to flip the screen like that. So one thing was that we are mobilizing folk to take food parcels. Those that can give groceries, it's a little bit difficult, but if they can send items of monies, we can use the monies in light of buying. And listen, we still want to stay in light of the rules and the law of the land, but nobody stops one person from going out and buying for 5 families. And a part of the 5 families, maybe 2 neighbors who gave money, but the 3 neighbors got together and said, listen, the other 2 neighbors didn't have money, but in our own little micro economy, we can cater for our buying for the other 2 neighbors or the other 2 families. And in doing so, you might, this is a reality which is going to grow now in South Africa. I might be on the highway driving and the police stop me and I say, these are the listed people. We're going to deliver the groceries for the family. And I believe in the goodness of our community and the goodness of even our land, that people will give access. Now, I can't promise it, but in another way, I've even asked, like that community, faith community that I work with, to give me a letter, and if it's required that I travel with a letter and a stamp, then I'm going to go to the 2 families that I'm buying for gave money, but the other 2 families who didn't give money. So making practical caregiving to make sure that people are eating. The other thing that I kind of wanted to put forward to us is also this reflection on what will we do. We need to keep a lookout for, like in the sectors of society, that we can't wait. And I'm grateful for certain big business that have reached out and also are doing their good. But in our communities, like you, people need to act already, thinking upon this is what government is saying, this is what the law of the land is saying, but how can we meet the needs of our people? So projections for future is that we already need to be talking about how can we innovate. And a little example is to say that in a small community, we said, listen, this lady is living in this arrangement. She and her family is there. How can we bring her on board in the next 3 months? Being a shop assistant, that's not going to work out for her because she can't even be assisting in a shop. But can she work with the community in doing some care and compassion work with our community? She's linked to our community, but in a way, we're innovating and creating jobs with the little we have in our hands. Why? We've prioritized that this person in our community cannot do the job of being a shop assistant. That shop is closed. That shop is not gonna pay the person. So we again are thinking with people who have access to some pay because they are in a contract job that's keeping them tided over for the next months or in a full-time employment. But in our own microcosm, we can be asking the question, what is the little that we have in our hand? Or if you like, the much, and with that, what can we do with it? So just these are some, if I can call it, caring reflections. I'm going to hand over Olefile to to give a little bit of what he's thinking upon, what he's seeing happening in his community, and then Brett will close us out as well. Over to Ollie.
Yeah, short one. I think the way that we do, I want to speak in the context of church. The way that we do church, it has got to be. We really have to reconsider that approach of pitching up on a Sunday and singing a couple of songs and hearing someone speak or preach from the podium. We have to be critical in our analysis of the communities that we are serving, and we cannot just pray in, again, social distancing. We can't be laying hands on people, but we have got to think critically about what people are going through. We have to be able to know, when we know we can love, when we know we can really care and be compassionate. And I think taking it from Jesus Christ, Jesus knew the people he was actually serving. He knew what they were going through, and I think this is the time. If there was a time when we are challenged to be like Christ, it's now. We have to really get into that space of understanding what people are going through. And so even yesterday, we were just chatting with the leadership of the small community of faith that we are a part of in City Deep, serving those flats, those new flats there, and we were able to, through people who live within those blocks of flats, to say, go around, be a good neighbor, find out who needs help. And we as a church are committed to that community. We'll see how we can actually get help from our side. So we tried all the numbers that are available for food parcels and food security during this lockdown period. Unfortunately, no one picked up, and we realized, you know what, we can't be waiting for them. Let's help from our own pocket. So we had to dig into the church coffers and go and buy a couple of items and distribute to 10 families in City Deep. And I think churches have to do ministry unusual in a sense. We've got to really get to the nitty-gritties of what it means to live in a dire situation. I mean, right now, I think COVID has surfaced a lot of people who are struggling in townships, in the suburbs, everywhere. So all of a sudden, we've been seeing them begging on the side of the road. But now it's become a lot more in your face because of this COVID-19. So that's it. That's my two. That's what we are trying to do in our side of town, and yeah, it feels good to help, but it's not enough. We still have to do a lot more than we have done.
So again, we want to affirm what our government has been able to do. I want to, from myself and my colleagues as well, we're just in a good branding of South Africa. We're respectful of our president and making the call for the lockdown, for making this a state of disaster for the nation to understand, for trying to do the work of curving this bell, or flattening the curve. Sorry, flattening the curve. Everybody's been listening to. How can we make sure that the infections are not at a rate? So I think in some way we've noted, but as Olefile said, some folk have struggled with the online, trying to get access to food security programs. And in the mix of it, we can't wait. Because even last week when I spoke with a group of folk from the global affiliates, global affiliates of Dignity, one lady from Pakistan who was part of the conversation said, listen, we're 5 weeks in lockdown. And while COVID-19 is a reality, we are fearful and paranoid about this. But she clearly said that for some of our people, they will end up being diminished and dehumanized because of the shortages of food. They may even end up becoming sick to an extent of death without food access. So right now, it's a language that's happening, but it shouldn't just be intellectually thought upon. We're needing, as Olefile said, for people to think practically, still staying true to what is the law of the land around lockdown. I think people can find safe passage and way to make available the help that they can afford our communities. Like Oli said, 10 families were benefited by food parcels. We're now considering how can we go from last one of 30 families having access to food parcels to 60. So we don't do less. We try to do more, but again, staying in the safety guidelines of our country and making sure that we are not putting any people at risk. Over to Brett, as you share with us maybe some caring realities as you think, and then we're going to come to close.
Cool. I've got a few ideas. The first one is just kind of linked to the first part of this conversation, the political nature of being able to say, here's a whole bunch of solutions, but actually they all require data. And so again, it's one of those things we've been thinking through one of our non-profits, that something online isn't necessarily access to everyone. And so one of the things I saw that was really good is that a doctor friend of mine, you might have heard of him, Michael Moll, got hold of me, and they're working on something that's like a free phone call in terms of doctor connection, but that doesn't involve data. And so they've really made it like free, not just free accessible, but it's really accessible to anyone that has a phone. So that might also be not be the whole country, but it probably includes a lot more than a lot of these things are. And so that whole thing about thinking critically when something feels free, but still is only going to get access to those who can make a video call or who can get connected or whatever. So we've got to keep that in mind. But alongside those, some of the things, the initiatives I've heard of, one is something called Common Change, which is an organization that groups people together with money to meet needs of people they know. So it's a giving through relationship. And they've responded to COVID. My wife's actually kind of heads it up in South Africa, but they've responded to COVID by making a special COVID group. And the idea of that is to connect people that have money to give with those that have needs, because often they don't know each other. And so it's becoming a connection point to gather the resources and gather the people that need the resources. And I think a lot of churches and other organizations are finding ways of doing that. I was on a parish call with 6 Anglican churches yesterday in the same way, just finding out how do we connect the resources we have so that we're not all reinventing what needs to be done. And then I'm just trying to remember all the things I wanted to share. Oh, a friend of mine, again, like this is one time where social media has, Olefile was talking about, this is a time when the church needs to come to the party. I think this is a time when social media, along with all the bad fake news, all the stuff that's always negative on it, like this is a time when it's been the most positive it's ever been, I think, in terms of connecting people, in terms of sharing information, in terms of access. And I think it's really up to us to, for those that do have the data and have the access, to use it and wield it really well in terms of sharing good information, in terms of sharing good resources. And one way I've seen that happen is that a friend of mine, Robin, started sharing every day of lockdown. She found an NGO that's doing phenomenal work, and she shares their bank details. She shares a story about them and invites people to get involved. And she's tagged me in it every day. She sees me as an influencer. And so literally all I do with that every day is share it on my page and invite people, not to connect with all 21 or all 40 or however many organizations there'll be at the end, but just to kind of read through the stories at the very least, like get to know what is happening, what people are doing amazing work, but also try and see if there's one that grabs your attention, and grab a bunch of mates and start giving 20 Rand, 50 Rand, 100 Rand, whatever you can afford. But every day on my Facebook feed, you're going to see an organization that is looking after children, that's looking after wives, that's looking after hungry people or whatever it is. And there's opportunities for friends of mine who don't connect with those places, who don't know those people, to actually reach into their wallets and start connecting. And so there's just become a lot of ways that we can actually make a difference. I know Checkers has vouchers. I know there's e-wallet. There's ways that those who have resources can get the resources to the people in safer ways than us all meeting and having people in lines, lining up for sandwiches and bags of food and stuff like that. And so I think, Seth, what you're saying about keeping with the law, but also keeping kind of within the spirit of the law. So there are ways that we can do stuff creatively, but we're not looking for loopholes. We're not trying to get around so that I can exercise my dog while I drop off these groceries or whatever. But it's ways that we can keep the nation safe as possible, but still commit to meeting the needs of people around us. And so I think social media is a great way that I was able to help somebody in Joburg, Pretoria, because I was just able to connect to. And a pastor WhatsApped me last night to say that they were able to connect. They were able to give some money through e-wallet. They were able to kind of walk alongside a bit. And that's a need I couldn't touch myself, in a sense. I mean, I could have put something EFT into a bank, but now there's someone in the community that is able to meet needs, and they can speak to the legal people in the community because they understand the context better. And so it really is a great time for people with kind of social media presence to be fully on board, connecting all the lines so that the people that are doing amazing stuff can really do it well.
Beautiful. As you listen to my colleagues and as those of you that are out there, what's beautiful about it, we want to thank BeLive for allowing us the space. I also would hope that they would give us, in a time of COVID-19, not just days before we need to upgrade to a paid version. They should keep it open so we can get this content out with people like myself, Brett, and Olefile. So thank you to BeLive. Also, you've heard some organizations mention. Much love and respect to the organization of Heartlines, best recognized as a national promotion center of values and ethical living standards where values have interacted with people. Myself, Olefile, and Brett have had the honor to work across the land on doing work. For example, one of the products called the Bridge Leadership Retreat to begin for people to understand. I'm so grateful that I think some of that work is now helping people to already be locked into empathy, understanding, and action around doing good for people. So just a shout out of love to Heartlines. From my own personal space, I'm really grateful that I'm working with Church Out the Box, a context of people that are faith committed over the last 2.5 years. People like Luella Naidu that are making things happen within that context. Another context in Joburg South, Via Christi community. People that are really taking social justice seriously and having the conversation, not just for the conversation's sake, to almost have us celebrating our romantic intellectual thoughts. No, but taking whatever we can put with intellect and mobilize it on the ground. The movement that we know as What's Your Story. So if you're out there and you want to get connected, please check out What's Your Story. I'm just shouting a shout out of love to those organizations because I know of them. The Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, Sean Bolton, and taking leadership around, even just recently, 2 days ago, getting 33 signatories on board to put their names, their titles, their credentials, to getting people just aware. Lastly, I'd say, just in saying a thank you to and shout out of love, which I'll also have my colleagues do the same as well. Shout out of love to the COVID-19 communications that came from the South African Council of Churches. Heartlines has been powering a thread of communications that got out to our people. And let me say this. We sometimes take English as the language of, of everybody, but English in our country's context is not the be-all and end-all of communications. We're so grateful that COVID-19 communications from the South African Council of Churches, as powered by Heartlines, came out in a series of posters that were accessed by people in language of their heart and of their love, because we take this for granted. Media communications will not get to people if they don't understand. So in light of inclusion and diversity, we got to diversify our approach in the way we speak, in the way we write, in the way we capture messages. So just again, a shout out of love to the SACC. And one of the organizations I'm also connected with is SACMAN, the South African Christian Ministers Network, Bishop Marcus Jacobs, that is doing some amazing work out in the south part of Joburg. Thank you for then taking on these communications to the place and space of community leaders and church leaders. So yeah, that's from me with some shout outs of love to organizations that I work with. And I'm indebted to them because they're doing some amazing work in such a time as this. Olefile, any shout out of love from you and Brett as well?
I think for me, it's a shout out to people who are enduring these times, particularly those that we take for granted. I'm thinking about our informal traders. I'm thinking about our small business owners who had to really just stop business abruptly and having not made enough to get by. Shout out to them, and my wife is one of them. So I think we really there's this notion of the economy of the country rests upon the SME sector, but that sector is actually the hardest hit during this time. Yeah, shout out even in terms of churches that have taken the message on to their constituencies, as Seth has said, in terms of the structures we're working with, from the Evangelical Alliance to the SACC, and to the denominations connected to them. because these small businesses, some of them do go to church, and so I want to say big ups to the church for coming to the party during this time.
Thank you, Olefile. Brett, any shout outs of love?
Yeah, I think just shout out to Common Change for creating that fund that people can get connected to around the country and start connecting with needs. Shout out to the warehouse in Cape Town that is doing some really good work in terms of pulling people together, in terms of critical thinking, but also like really activity and action-based service to people that are really looking into the whole kind of homeless situation we've got going here at the moment, and trying to find justice to that. I think of More Than Peace, who are always involved in spaces like that. There's just a whole host of kind of organizations and people we can mention. The Cape Town Together group and the CAN groups, all the community action networks, that people that are just tirelessly volunteering and putting up with some hectic stuff from typical bad South Africans, but pushing through and really mobilizing and seeing good happen, seeing networks happen and connections and things. I think there's so much good. And if I just give a personal shout out, I want to think of people who kind of life continues as normal. So I'm thinking of cashiers at my local Pick and Pay, who put themselves at risk so that I can have enough and more than enough and kind of all the things I want. But for them, it's just work as normal, and they've got to face 300 or 1,000 or 3,000 or I don't know how many people pass through a day. The police and the army, I know that there's a bad rep in some places, but there's so many people that are involved in those services that are putting their lives and time on the line to kind of try and keep the country in lockdown. And a big shout out to the president. I can't remember a time when it's felt like we've been led as a country, actually. And so, like, I think he had a bit of a rough start, but I think this kind of action has really brought Cyril Ramaphosa to the fore. And I feel proud of our president. I feel proud of the leaders of our country looking around the world and seeing that South Africa has probably handled this the best or amongst the best of a number of countries. And there's always criticism that can be leveled, but I think there's so much just praise and appreciation. I'm sure so many of them have been working around the clocks and not being able to sleep and thinking about this stuff all the time on such a much broader scale than we have to. And I think it's good for us to acknowledge we can be quick to shout against them when they get it wrong, but it's been phenomenal feeling well led by our president. So thank you. And yeah, just you guys. I think the fact for me that there's just three of us on this call and it's not three white men. We are all men, so maybe we can work on that. But I think it's significant that so maybe shout out to Heartlines that I was on a call this morning with 9 leaders, of which only 3 were white, and just starting to see a bit more of a diversity, not just in look, but in depth of leadership. So I want to shout out to both of you guys as leaders that I really look up to, that just hearing your stories and hearing your thoughts on these things are just so encouraging. And may we see more of that, and may we see more of spaces where white people are just fully in leadership and in control. May we see them stepping away from the microphone and just realizing that as 8% of the people in this country, we need to do a whole lot better.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Olefile. You've heard some shout-outs of love. I hope you've enjoyed what we call critical reflections. If my colleagues are open, we might try and repeat this once or twice a week, every 2 weeks or once a week. Just because we are practitioners, we're working nationally, we're working locally. Yes, I want to just say again, we are, as South Africans, grateful for the leadership we've received from our president. We ask more local municipality councillors and so on to get behind this good drive, of a positive drive to see the safety of our people. But then also, while we're doing this, to the globe out there, you are leaders out there in your communities. If you've enjoyed this communication, please add your critical voice by comments and chats. It's 45 minutes into this live live feed. I'm grateful to my friends, my beautiful friends, because I know as well life can be tough on us. But thank you for giving of your time and just being available to have this conversation. We're putting out this as an act of love and care. The critical reflections that we've afforded you is not meant to hurt anybody or throw anyone in, and get their mind in a toppled curve. But we do mean to disrupt and interrupt the narrative that is not about justice. We mean to disrupt and interrupt the narrative that is not about care and compassion with understanding. We mean to interrupt and disrupt the narrative that is lazy in its critique of those who are the marginalized. So with these two colleagues, I know that I'm in a space of, in my own bias, a comfort zone, because we want to work for justice, for mercy and humility. So if you're out there, please follow Olefile Masangane. They are influencers in their own rights. Please follow Brett Anderson. Connect with them, have a conversation, see who they can connect you with, and we're available. So the only way I know how to close this out, I hope it works, because it's my first time here doing this with my colleagues, but I practiced it with him earlier. So let's see if they hear the music. We're going to close out in this vibe. Just to bring some hope. Aha. Yes. Wherever you at. We live with Black Coffee here, just using some music to move the vibe. So thank you for joining us on Critical Reflections with Seth Niker, Olefile Masangane, and Brett Fish Anderson. Spread the love, baby. Spread the love. Peace out. Thank you, friends.